Here we are.
Here we are. Hi, Michele.
Hey, dear, how are you?
I'm good. It's
Welcome
nice
back.
to see you.
Welcome back. So, Italiano, por el momento, Italiano, per favore. There is a club in St. Louis that goes by that name. It's going to be in English, sarà in inglese, e quindi benvenuti tutti. Però discuteremo in inglese e il tema è gli argomenti che Robin ha sviluppato ultimamente molto forti sulla questione euro, il mio parziale accordo e parziale disaccordo, così facciamo un po' di discussione. Normalmente siamo molto in accordo, stavolta almeno 50-50. Aspettate che chiudo i rumori che vengono da la gente che mi manda messaggi su WhatsApp. E niente, it will be in English though. So, Robin, shall we shut down the euro, or what is it? What's your criticism? I remember your argument. You said to remember Hans Walter Sinn, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and in the 90s, when I was still involved with CPR and building the euro was the topic, the super hot topic. I tended to agree with Hans Walter, but only partially. He was just opposed, period. I was of the opinion that it could have been done, but first there was a need of imposing fiscal discipline on some countries, which had not been achieved. The idea was fiscal discipline will be achieved. The line that won was, as usual, the optimistic social democratic line. Yes, men are imperfect. Yes, countries are misbehaving. Yes, the situation in Italy and other areas. At the time, also Spain was going. Then Spain did extremely well. In fact, that's something we should discuss, how Spain did so well until the 2008 crisis and then blew off after that. But the idea was Giavazzi Pagano, basically, the advantages of tying one's hand. The enlightened idea, the optimistic idea was, it doesn't matter, if we build an autonomous independent central bank for the euro area, and this central bank only targets inflation, fiscal discipline will be automatically imposed by market conditions. There will be no way to misbehave fiscally when you have a common monetary policy that try to, how can I say, impose fiscal discipline by keeping inflation low. And instead, it did not happen. How do you say it?
So it's great to be back with you, Michele. Thank you for having me. And let me first say, I'm not opposed to the euro. I think the euro is a great idea. I think European unity and Europe is a great idea. Also, I am not anti-Italian at all. I love Italy, and it is one of the most beautiful countries in the world, and Italians are amazing for the most part. So, I'm generally a big fan, but nothing in life is perfect, and the euro has some major problems, and the question is, what do we do about them? Where I started on 3 recent Substack pieces, Michele, which you saw, is we have major geopolitical uncertainty around Europe. Russia invaded Ukraine, the Chinese are making trouble, the global climate picture is complicated. For all these things, we need fiscal space. You need government resources to be able to spend money on defense, on intelligence, to build industries that can compete with others, to protect people from climate change. And if you look, for example, at assistance for Ukraine from European countries, the Kiel Institute, which is a university in northern Germany, put together financial assistance, humanitarian assistance, and military assistance. And The Scandinavian countries relative to GDP provide a huge amount. Germany provides a huge amount. The UK, even though it's basically experiencing something of a fiscal crisis, provides a lot. France, which is in a fiscal crisis, provides a lot. And Italy and Spain provide very, very little. And in the end, that, in my mind, is a reflection of a lack of fiscal space. Debt is so high that you really can't provide much aid. That's something we should come back to, Michele, because I got a lot of pushback on that particular view. But my point of departure is, well, it's clear that we have fiscal capacity problems in the Eurozone. That is partly a result of the euro, because as you rightly said, when the euro was created, the idea was to have markets as a disciplining device. If you run bad fiscal policy, if you have big deficits, if you have lots of debt, then markets will charge you a high interest rate and you will be punished and you will have to fix your fiscal policy. And in the Eurozone, that isn't happening. And it goes back to something, you remember the Delors Commission, which was debating how the euro should be created and what the institutional setup should be. And at the time, there was a debate, should voting rights within the ECB, for example, be constrained for countries that run bad fiscal policy? Because if you don't limit the voting power of high debt countries, they will start making monetary policy to help themselves.
Okay, so that's one first point. Your view is, let's try to make clear for people listening to us. I agree on the need for fiscal, what you call fiscal space. What Robin means is there are areas where we desperately need to spend. Yes. One is the military, and not only the military. Some countries like Italy, for example, desperately need to spend on education and research, where we spend extremely little. So does Spain. In fact, a bit everybody needs to spend more on education and research, but certainly some need to spend on education and research way more than others, right? We need to spend on energy because at least the fixed starting cost of nuclear plants and so on needs a huge capital investment, which doesn't need to be subsidized, but need to be financed, which is a difference, up front, then repaid over time at the appropriate discount rate. So there is need for fiscal space. So we agree on that. And a number of countries don't have that fiscal space. Germany has it. The Netherlands have it. Very few other countries have it. In fact, let's face it, not even United States have it.
Yeah.
But that's another story. Today, we're going to just stay on this continent. I'll try to do continents at once.
Yeah.
Reason is sorry, let me, that's door. Otherwise, we would be invaded by noise. I apologize. So your point is we got here at a situation in which the fiscal space is unevenly distributed.
Yes.
And now the countries that don't have it are going to go and ask those that have it, spend for me, directly or indirectly. I want to, and then you say, well, one way of avoiding that is allowing the monetary decision to be taken by a committee where it's not true that one country, one vote, but your vote is directly proportional to your fiscal discipline. The more fiscally disciplined you have been, the more power you have. Okay, fine, but this should have been at the beginning. It's a quarter century that it's there.
Yes.
So problem is that now I think nobody's going to accept that.
Yep.
And therefore, what we do.
So that was, first of all, the perfect summary. Much
No,
clearer
I'm just trying to put things in
than
order
what I
because-
said. And so something has to change, because if nothing changes, Europe will become more and more irrelevant in the global stage. We need fiscal capacity. So how do we make fiscal capacity? The best way would be for high debt countries to reduce their debt level, raise taxes, cut spending. But that doesn't look likely. So low debt countries, and this is my suggestion, so Germany and the Netherlands, they need to say, enough. We have to renegotiate. If we cannot renegotiate in good faith, we will exit the euro. So then the question is, what would happen if you exit the euro? What would happen is that low debt countries like Germany and the Netherlands would see a very large appreciation of their currencies. There would be a huge flight to safety to German and Dutch and Finnish and Austrian government debt. They would have interest rates that are very low. And there would be capital flight out of high debt countries. So Italy, Spain, that would see large currency devaluations. I gave a guess in my pieces of around 30-40%. And you would have interest rates that would be much, much higher. And there would be a fiscal and a debt crisis. A debt crisis means that the government is no longer able to roll over debt easily at low interest rates. And so what could happen is a partial default. And a partial default creates fiscal space. Why? Because payments that are due don't get made. And so when I said countries that have high debt need to raise taxes or they cut spending, there's a third option, which is you default. And a default, of course, bails in English we say bail in, domestic taxpayers who were unwilling to pay a little bit higher taxes or accept lower spending, because people's retirement savings are implicitly linked to government debt and a number of other indicators that depend on it. So you're basically forcing people to pay when they didn't want to pay before. And ultimately, that decision has to come from northern countries, because the southern countries will never change.
Well, all right. So let's make one step forward. Are you suggesting default?
I think a partial default would be very, very likely in the event of a German exit from the euro. That's right.
That sounds a lot like AFD plans.
No, it's just what happens when take a step back. What is the euro? The euro is just a system of fixed exchange rates. When fixed exchange rates are unsustainable, they usually come with a sharp devaluation of the currency, and they usually come with high inflation and much higher interest rates. So this is just macro 101, and it is about the sustainability of a peg. You and I, we have talked about a peg, for example, in the case of Argentina. I'm very critical of the Argentinian exchange rate peg, which Milei keeps going, because it forces Argentina into a straitjacket that doesn't fit. And it's the same basically with the euro. So you don't have to be an AFD supporter in Germany to think that the euro is not a good idea. That is just basic macro. And the point that I'm trying to make is, if Europe has all these external threats and we need fiscal space, the most important thing is that we mobilize fiscal space. If that happens via a partial default, so be it.
Yeah, but the consequences of mobilizing the fiscal space in that form might be dramatic, may actually reduce the ability to generate income, which is actually the problem that the Argentinians are facing, right? But one way of thinking, the way the Argentinians are doing, is the following. Yes, I should grossly devalue my currency, which in fact implies I should also do some default on my foreign debt. They may actually reduce the current inflation rate, which is nothing but a hidden devaluation. Do we agree on that? Right. So in some, I agree on the technical part of that. I completely agree. Right. The currently still high, because Milei has reduced inflation rate in Argentina quite a bit, but it's still running 3% a month, which means it's running at 15 times what's in Europe.
Yes.
Roughly. I would like to recommend everybody to remember that the way you get the annual total inflation rate, if the monthly one is 3%, is not by multiplying by 12, but by doing 1.03 at the power 12, which is a bigger number. It cumulates. So it's probably more than 15 times. I don't know. I haven't done the explanation. So Robin is saying, well, what's that reflects by increasing prices in peso is that the peso is worth less, and that's a way of making the peso worth less, at least internally, even if externally, theoretically, by pegging. So what are they doing in order to sustain that? They're getting money from the political godfather. They have found a political godfather. It's called Trump. He's got a very deep purse, and from his point of view, 40 billion, 50 billion, 60 billion is nothing, given that he's sitting on, but got the number now, it's become too big. But 40 trillions, is that where we're going? Of debt. Who cares about, a little, and that allows them to keep up for a time, but because this is an ever growing thing, and I don't think the US will keep.
Yeah. Right.
Obviously, they expect the miracle, which is the growth rate of real GNP in Argentina will skyrocket at 6, 7, 8%, and productivity will also do. And then at that point, the exchange rate is not an issue anymore, because you're. One could say, well, here's something that Italy could do. Italy needs a godfather and Milei's style reform, and then its GDP will grow, and this huge debt burden will go away slowly but surely, and fiscal space will be created, because to the extent that in a couple of years you're able to do that, then the market will say, okay, they're on the right track. Let's trust them. Let's buy their debt, right? They'll be able to pay. But Italy doesn't have a godfather. Now, there is politics here, but I will not get into it. Yeah, that's exactly what Ora's program is. But we're not in power. Meloni is in power, and there is no reason to expect she will adopt such policies. In fact, she's adopting exactly the opposite policies, right? Exactly the opposite policies. That's Robin's point. He says, what we're getting is more of the same from the Italians in particular. I don't know if you think that also the Greeks and the Spanish and the French are doing more of the same or not.
More of the same. Same. È uguale.
Not the Greeks.
È uguale anche.
I have a very optimistic Robin Woods today with me.
All right.
Okay, no, I'll take it. So he says, okay, Michele, but that's all wishful thinking. It's not going to happen. These guys are not going to do it. Your country will not reform. They're not going to start growing. and the other group it's going to do the same. Spain's going to do the same. Greece, eventually they'll derail. The French, you have seen what they're doing. They're ousting de facto their president just to keep their pension age at 62. So no hope there.
Yeah.
Germany should just save itself. Otherwise, it will be drowned.
Well, so let me push back there on that, because I don't think this is about Germany saving itself. It is about Europe saving itself. As you and I said earlier on in our conversation, you need some kind of a discipline, right? You need policymakers like Giorgia Meloni, who in some respects is, an impressive leader. You need them to be afraid of something so that they do difficult reforms. And the only way you can get them to be afraid is if you allow markets to scare policymakers from making bad decisions. And in the Eurozone, that isn't happening because you mentioned Godfather. So in a way, Italy does have a godfather, which is the ECB. And of course, that's partly because Italy plays a very important role. It has lots of intellectual leadership at the ECB. That led to things like the TPI, which is the anti-fragmentation tool that the ECB introduced in 2022. And that tool is about if yields go too high and if there is a judgment by the ECB that this is not justified by fundamentals, then the ECB can intervene. And if you do something like that, the market says, ooh, this is a big signal. The ECB can intervene. So if I try and drive Italian interest rates up so that policy becomes better, I may get punished because the ECB will activate the TPI tool and bring yields back down. So markets don't even try. And so in what I have been saying is that Europe will never get out of this status quo unless there is reform that starts at the ECB. And the ECB has to be forced out of debt markets so that fiscal discipline can be restored. A lot of people say, well, wait a minute, Robin, the US is a fiscal union. It has a Federal Reserve. So why are you complaining all the time about Europe? The US is the same. And the US is the same with one big difference. US states cannot take on much debt.
Yeah. Now, this we've been trying to explain for years. The US states can take up an extremely small amount of debt. Just essentially, from any practical purposes, zero debt, because they can take up debt only, and I repeat it this was during the period of the Euro crisis, 2011, 2013. I must have repeated this a million times on TV. And, basically, the only debt you can take is for utilities and infrastructure investment, and it's backed by the yield on that. So there is essentially U.S. states cannot issue that, period.
Exactly.
So it's all federal debt.
So you have a balanced budget amendment basically at the state level, and you have a history where states and municipalities have been allowed to default. So that is the regime that Europe needs. And Luis Garicano has a great book, as you know, Crisis Cycle, where he basically says Europe needs a debt mechanism, a debt resolution mechanism, a default mechanism. You cannot have a situation where the ECB says, and this goes back to a really important point for the euro, Draghi in 2012 said, we will do whatever it takes to protect the euro. And that comment, and Draghi, by the way, I'm the biggest fan. He's a great man and a great European leader. But that comment tied the survival of the euro to avoidance of debt crisis. And that is a connection that is wrong.
Problem is, I agree, and I used to agree 30 years ago, but I'm a practical man. Too late. And Louis is too late. He should have said these things back when he thought instead euro was a great idea. Many economists are suddenly waking up. Let me be frank. While I agree with the model, I think it's completely unimplementable. Why? Because one thing is to be the state of Missouri or the city of New York. If those young among you can look for the New York Times, I think it was, or maybe it was something, back in the early 70s, Nixon to New York City, get lost or go to hell or something like that, which is when the federal government gave the finger to the city of New York. They would say, oh, help me, Godfather, I am going to default. And the administration said, oh, go ahead, default. Counties default, states have defaulted. Yes, the market are ready. And the market, in fact, price the risk of that. If we pass a debt resolution, or if we even start, if tomorrow a political group managed to convince the European Parliament or Germany or the Netherlands or somebody with political clout says, all right, gentlemen, it's on the table, debt resolution mechanism for the European Union. Let it be known that sooner or later, within 6 months, a year or two, we'll pass legislation and take agreement and sign treaty for which the ECB will no longer have to back the debt of a country that is in default and will not do what Lagarde said and tried to say, that that was not what she was doing, but actually kept doing and is doing, which is to fix. That was an amazing moment, right?
Yes.
I mean, just the slip of the tongue of the president of the ECB. Many may not remember, but who follows financial market has some moment in mind, right? They're very revealing. What was it, 5 years ago?
March 12th, 2020, COVID.
This is a man with a good memory, March 12th, 2020. So 5 years and a half ago. Lagarde had just become president shortly before, and I think the first press conference.
One of our first, yeah.
And she just came out saying, we are not in the business of managing country spreads, country risk. And all hell broke loose in financial markets until the chief economist said, no, she didn't mean it. That, she was just, come on, guys, she was kidding. It's carnival, after all, somewhere on the planet. And the thing subside. So the point is, if we do that, Italy spreads will go at 500, 600 basis points overnight. So will the French spread. So probably will the Spanish one, even if the Spanish economy is for now doing better than either Italy or France. And then we're going to have a 2-year-long major depression in Europe with people rioting on the street. That's the point.
Well, the question is the current setup sustainable if you do nothing?
I agree with you. It's not.
It's not.
Well, let me interrupt you, then I'll let you go along. It's sustainable, but it will drag everybody's in southern Italian mediocrity, not even northern Italian, not even average Italian. In the very long run, Europe will become, if not Sicily or Campania, will become Lazio. That is, or Central Italy. That is an area where there's no economic growth, where people live on debt slowly. There is no growth, and then there is a small group of elite that collects almost all the rent. Yes, I'm talking about a half a century horizon, but that's the horizon.
So I have a shorter horizon. I think that is, I think you're painting the right picture over the medium term, but I think the horizon is much shorter. And I think there are lots of parallels with the United States and Trump. I was at a lecture recently where Maury Obstfeld was talking about the United States and its, after World War II, its attitude to be altruistic and to be an altruistic hegemon, to help others, to use American power to help others. And that policy became politically unsustainable at home because the US forgot that its main job is to help Americans. And that is what Make America Great Again is, really. I mean, whether or not in reality it is that, and whether Trump is really doing that, of course, is a completely open question. But the reason that Make America Great Again is such a powerful slogan is because many, many Americans feel like the country's leadership, the elite, forgot what their job is, which is to help Americans do better. And in Germany, especially now that Germany is not doing so well, what Germany is really doing is being an altruistic European power, because it is allowing its fiscal space and its resources to be used by others. That is happening via the ECB, where the ECB takes on contingent liabilities when it activates TPI, for example, or it happens via EU joint debt issuance, which is basically using German fiscal space. And we are running out of time on that, and there will be Make Germany Great Again. That is coming. I think the stream that you and I did a couple months ago, AfD was already rising very strongly. AfD is basically the equivalent of the Trump movement in Germany. AfD now is at 26%. In the election in February, they had 20. These are huge moves. It's really fast. The next election is in 2029, if the German government even survives that long. These days, nothing in Germany is for certain. Governments are falling before their term expires. And so I think the horizon is much shorter. I think German altruism is ending. That will come at the latest in 2029, when the AfD has to be part of some government, probably. And so the question is, would you like to reform things now while everyone has sensible people at the table? Or do you want to do it after 2029 when the AfD is sitting at the table? And I think now is a better time to do it. So what can Germany do now? One obvious thing is to make sure that in the ECB, in the Euro system, it is properly represented. That currently is not the case. The current representatives from Northern Europe cheerled things like the TPI. In other words, they promoted TPI. They promoted the entanglement of the ECB with fiscal sustainability. This was a huge mistake. This happened in 2022. For example, the head
The
of
Euro
the
debt dream, the Euro debt dream. So the
Yes.
left is so I completely agree. The point is the following: I completely agree on the analysis. Even worse, as I said, many people, even some of those that now suggest we have to do this, we have to do that, even a few years ago insisted on the fiscal compactum, the Euro debt. Now there's a lot of converted. But right now, and I completely agree on the political urgency that you're placing into it. Basically, I think that declaring that today would be a gigantic step into the Grand Canyon without proper parachute. Thelma and Louise style. I don't feel either. I don't know if you Thelma and Louise style. That the movie ends and they're happy, but we're allowed to dream. We're allowed to dream. We're allowed to dream.
Yeah.
That's the trick and the final scene of the movie. But we realistically know that they crash at the bottom of the Grand Canyon, gigantic explosion, and everything goes to hell. I don't. Maybe it's because I have even less consideration than you do of current. You say there are responsible people. I don't know. Frankly, I don't think Meloni even understands what's going on. She's just putting on an act. Giorgetti is getting orders from his Ragioniere Generale and Direttore Generale. Maybe Panetta understands a bit the underlying economics, but he would not come here to discuss with us. Macron does. Maybe Pedrito Sanchez has got some idea, but he's too much of a poker player. Merz, I'll let you decide. I can't figure a guy. I really cannot. He's a mystery for me. But then again, I was confused on Merkel, right? So evidently the German psyche is not my strength. I am not a good analyst of... but yes, maybe because I got myself involved in politics, I prefer to say there is a narrow path. If you let people like Robin and I go to power, we'll fix it, because I think there is. But I agree with you that all the incentives today are against that.
So
literally, how would you? So you're thinking of Germany. If Germany gets out, the Netherlands get out, probably Belgium gets out, probably the whole Eastern Europe gets out. Fiscal situation in Eastern Europe is not so bad. Certainly the Polish are not going to be staying there getting drowned into the Baltic, the Italian. It's going to become a Catholic Mediterranean Europe, right? Greece.
So, first of all, let's be clear. Europe is a much bigger thing than the euro. European peace, European cooperation. You can have European foreign policy. You can have European defense. You can have a banking union. You can have a free trade area without the euro. You don't need a common currency. I think where we are now is we have a marriage that is not working. And we need to do something to make the marriage work. We have two options. One is we go to marriage counseling and we figure out how to fix the fiscal mess. Two, we start divorce, and perhaps because we start divorce, both parties start negotiating in good faith. And so my hope with you and people like you in Europe is, in the end, we can only call these things, we can only fix these things if we're honest about the problem. And to be honest about the problem, we need, above all, first, to be transparent. And that means allowing markets to set interest rates. And that means getting the ECB out of government bond markets. Everything else will follow. If Italian yields without the ECB involvement go up significantly, Italian policymakers will behave differently. Just think of, for example, the election in September 2022, after Draghi had resigned, when Meloni won. Was there any mention in that election of the spread? No. It was a complete non-issue. Why? Because that summer, the ECB had intervened to cap the spread, and it had introduced the TPI. That's crazy when you think about it, because debt and the spread should have been topic number one. So I think where I'm such a big fan of yours is these things, we have to make them transparent. What is happening in Europe right now is untransparent, and it will end at the latest with the AfD. And we don't want that. So we have to do something beforehand. That's why I wrote my pieces. That's why I wrote that Germany has to exit the euro. I'm a fan of the euro, but I don't think the way the ECB is working is ultimately in the long-term interest of the survival, and it's ultimately definitely not in the interest of a strong Europe, which we need. So we have to change this. And just us having a conversation, just us writing things like the Substack that I wrote, it raises the debate on the issue. Maybe nothing changes because vested interests are super powerful, fine. But at least we're kicking off the debate, and I think that's really important.
I have a hard time saying something. Robin's logic is very straightforward. It's very clear. You see Amir trying to resist, taking notes and thinking. Yeah, I can see the dramatic risk of all this. So let me ask you a question. Try to shift the burden away from me. Do you think AfD will win? I think the answer is yes. Conditionally, but yes. If you have to place a bet, you probably place it on that. What do you think they'll do once they get to power? Because they will not be able to rule alone.
So the question is, can you have a government without the AfD in the next election? And of course,
I think it would be disastrous if they do that, because it would provoke a reaction in many German saying, wait a second, this is everybody, including the communists, just to stop them. It's going to remind the German of something that I don't even want to mention, but anybody that knows history knows what I mean, and it's going to make things even worse.
So I have no connection with the AfD. Not that I need to clarify this. I'm not a fan.
But we do understand that that's where it's going through. I mean,
absolutely. And I really worry that the current Grand Coalition is very harmful to German democracy. You will remember in the 70s, Germany had grand coalitions, and that was when we had the Red Army faction and we had all kinds of political extremism. These grand coalitions are very bad for democracy in Germany. So the question is Friedrich Merz, the chancellor, going to do the hard things? Is he going to be willing to rock the boat a little bit on the ECB, for example, and tell Germany's representatives, hey, I need you to get fiscal policy out of monetary policy. And
sorry.
No, it's fine.
We have a little guest here. She's a little star, the ballerina. Say hi. That's my friend Robin.
Hi, what's your name?
He's in Washington.
Amalia. Such a pretty
Amelia.
name. Amelia. You have a princess dress on.
Yeah. She's a super princess. All right, now stay here and we listen to this gentleman. Is that okay? Like he's a teacher at school.
Luckily, I think we're close to the end of our discussion, Amelia. But the question, I think, to your question, will the AfD be in power? It depends on Friedrich Merz, and that was your question, right? Is the current German chancellor willing to rock the boat and do some hard things? I think the jury is out on that, and I'm not that optimistic.
Well, I think you're being honest, and I'm being honest too. I mean, I understand perfectly the logic behind your argument. I as I said, the analysis coincide even on the historical thing. I think there was a huge mistake in thinking that goodwill, basically, and trust and some form of long run wisdom would have allowed the ECB and the common monetary policy to be consistent with fiscal discipline. After a quarter century, that's not the case. It's actually the opposite. It's like obviously, yeah, once you deviate from the cooperative strategy, we all know in a repeated game, if somebody starts deviating from the cooperative strategy, either you have immediately a punishment, it didn't come. It should have come during the first Berlusconi government for Italy. The first Berlusconi government is the government that immediately started. Tremonti, that's why, many people wonder why Boldrin and his buddies are so critical of Tremonti. Well, very simple. Not that the previous Prodi government had done miracles. They had done the bare minimum to get into the euro, and they got immediately boycotted by the various ambitions of D'Alema and everybody that went after them and cooperated with them. But at least they had taken the right path. As soon as Berlusconi came to power in 2001, and the symbolic thing was Elsa von Herr and I going to the labor minister. We had prepared the revision of the pension reform and said, these are the things to be done. And the guy looked at us and said, not on my clock. I have no intention to lose election. Thank you for your job. This is going to go in the drawer, stay there forever. And that was a disaster. Those 5 years were disastrous financially. Nobody realized, but because it's the usual, when you start getting drugs at the beginning, you feel, whoa, I feel good, right? But then the thing came. So totally right. But now we have this ECB. I don't know. I don't know how to answer to what Robin said. I completely agree on the analysis. I think it's an extremely dangerous situation. I don't think the Grand Coalition to excludendo ad excludendum AFD is a great policy. I am a bit terrified by AFD, more than I am from Fratelli d'Italia, which is essentially a bunch of incompetent thieves from Rome, very frankly. But once they got to the table, they said, wait, this is a very nice table, with lots of food. Why don't we party a bit instead of rocking the table? And they are partying. The really dangerous guys are the Lega and the 5 Stars, as we've seen. I don't know, ladies and gentlemen. We love to sing.
Andiamo a vedere.
Basically, I think the analysis is totally...
Wonderful to see you, Michele. Thank you for having me on again. I love listening to you.
It's a pleasure. I have to remember to keep... You should tell me, Michele, I'm coming in, and that I'll welcome you instead of me. Sometimes I feel I'm bugging you. Because this is very important. I mean, that this is... I hope people understand what we're saying. I think the next 10 years are essentially hanging on this. I mean, the disaster may happen. Yeah, the point that Robin is making is something that people should think about. If we don't face this issue explicitly, and everybody's trying to avoid it, literally, especially after the Macron experience, it's going to force itself upon us. Exactly like in 2009, 2010, with the guys at Noise for America, we kept telling the Italians, look, the debt is going to screw you. It's going to blow in your face. No, we're the best in the world. And then it blew in their face. The same is going to happen. And it may get a lot uglier because the political movements in Europe toward national interest, correctly. I think the analogy with Trump is also correct. Will take an ugly aspect because it's going to come out in a non-cooperative game.
Yes.
Very non-cooperative. Well, let's push for something. I don't know, whatever.
Yes. Let's keep talking about it.
Let's keep
most
talking about
importantly.
it. Yeah. Thank you, sir. Enjoy your afternoon.
Thank you so much, Michele. Ciao.
Ciao, grazie a tutti per l'ascolto. Fate girare, lo metterò
Grazie a
qui.
lei.
Grazie. Ciao ciao. Ciao a tutti.